we have done it. We have compiled not just any top 10 list, but the top 10 player boards of all time. Not of 2024, not of this year, not of 2 years ago, of all time. Now, with that said, like any top 10 list, this is just our opinion.
The ones that we love.
This is based on a number of things, but what we wanted to say is that these are player boards, a lot of them, that when you open a box for the first time and you see the player board, maybe even before reading the rules, you're like, oh, what is this game doing? I need to learn these rules immediately so that we can play it. And that was kind of the impetus of wanting to put this list together. But as we started thinking about player boards, we started thinking about all the different types of player boards, why some of them hit a little different, and some of those will have a place on this list. And hopefully you'll find a player board on this list, at least one, that you're like, okay, yeah, that is a really good player board.
We could only do 10. So, there's going to be...
We had a much bigger list.
Right. We culled it down to this 10, and we picked each one on this list for specific reasons. And I'll kind of jump into that with my first one, and this is number 10. This is the player board for Russian Railroads / Ultimate Railroads. Now, what's really cool, the thing about this player board, it's not anything special components-wise. It is just a pretty much flat piece of cardboard. But this is the kind of player board that when somebody lays out the board for any of the railroad games, if you have Ultimate Railroads, it comes with all of them. They teach you the rules, they explain how the game is played, and then you get to look at your player board. And there's 4 different player boards that come in this game. And this is like that kind of thing that clicks in your head when you look at this and go, oh, but this one's different.
Yeah.
Look at like the tracks are different, the bonuses are different, the layout is different. You flip it over to the other side, and you're like, this one has spaces to put tiles on, and like it let your mind like reel at all the different like possibilities of the ways that you can play this game just from looking at the player boards.
Yeah, it pretty much introduces the player boards. Everything revolves around the player board as it relates to the different iterations of the Railroads games. Like most of the other components are effectively the same. You change some things. There's some maybe little tiles you put in and out.
You get some little extra
like
tokens and stuff.
But you can play Russian Railroads, and it's one of those player boards. But if you switch over and play any of the other ones, Germans on the flip side, right? Originally. You get that completely different experience. Plus, it's one of those player boards that you add to throughout the game so that by the end of the game, you have a lot of stuff on that board, like nice little wooden pieces showing all your tracks, which kind of thematically goes in with the building that game does.
Oh, yeah.
The game builds from like the first round where how many points do you score? 6. And to the last round, how many points did you score? 200 and something?
Right, it's huge. And it's all done on those mats. Like, I love this game, and that's a big part of it is getting to interact with that player board.
Yeah, the next one we want to talk about, different reasons, but the main reason I'd say is that Dice Throne is probably the closest thing to player boards, the game.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, obviously there's cards, there's dice, but when you select your character, particularly now, the game has evolved over time, but now it has turned into this game where it always comes in this sort of format. You're opening potentially a big box of characters, and like a video game fighting game, you're character selecting, handing this out across the table. And we haven't even opened the player board yet. You hand this to someone who's never played, and you're like, oh, this is cool. It's like everything for my characters in here. So you open it up, and the player boards themselves have so much information that when you look at them, you're seeing basically all the powers that you're going to have with the character. Not only that, they've done some cute and clever things with some of the characters, like for instance, the Cursed Pirate here actually flips over to a different side midway through or as you're playing.
They all have their own little twist. And, and again, kind of like playing in Ultimate Railroads, getting to experience these different characters, the first thing you're going to do anytime you play is unroll that player board and start reading what all the different powers. If you've never played Dice Throne, it's kind of like Yahtzee, where all the different combinations activate different powers, and they're so thematically tied together, and you're just like, oh, this character does something that no other character does, and it's very immediate to be able to parse that information just from looking at that player board.
Not to mention the artwork by Manny on those player boards.
And the production, the artwork, all of it's really cool.
Really, really good. The next one is one that is, we've got an example here that is not the first of its kind. We've got Age of Innovation here. But the original, Terra Mystica, then Gaia Project, now Age of Innovation, is effectively, in my opinion, one of the first player boards that introduced, at least to my knowledge, introduced that concept of having a bunch of stuff on your player board and then removing it throughout the game. Not only that, but it potentially coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, and a number of other things as well.
I mean, we've seen other games do this, but I think that they were, as far as I'm concerned, when I see this, we call, oh, that's like Terra Mystica.
Yeah.
Like it has that kind of vibe. I know like Scythe and other games have popularized that, but there's something so cool about playing that game for the first time. And yeah, it's like the opposite of some of these other games where you're building up your player board. This one, you're emptying it. And as you empty it, you're just getting more and more and more. You're getting income and cubes, and you're getting to move some of your cubes around, and it's very tactile. And this, I believe, the reason we picked this one, I would consider this the best version of the Terra Mystica environment to date.
Yeah, I believe it is. I think that there's a lot of people who love Terra Mystica. There's a lot of people who love Gaia Project. In fact, when Gaia Project came out, there's a lot of people who struggled with like, I don't know, I really love Terra Mystica. But Gaia Project was probably the better game.
I would say they made some innovations. And now,
This one takes the cake, and the big thing here is the variability. Not only are you doing all those things we just talked about, but at the beginning of the game, you're actually modularly creating your character, race, whatever, everything going on here.
Yeah.
It doesn't rely on the board itself, which in those old games, if you wanted to play a certain race or whatever, you would get that board for them. This, you get this board, and then you're drafting some of those things to put it together, which is a fun process in and of itself.
Making it a totally unique, different combination. It's like, this is the mountain board here, and it keeps the heart of what we love about the player board, but I think does, the best version of it.
Yeah, and speaking of modularity, this one kind of takes the cake. And this might surprise you, by the way, because I'm going to show this to you, and you're going to go, huh? This one here, this is one of the plastic dashboards from Massive Darkness 2, but this was introduced with Zombicide Black Plague.
Back in, 2015?
I believe. And before then, no one had ever done this. Also, side note, I now work for CMON. I just want to put this out there. It did not earn them a place on this list in any way, shape, or form, but I remember very vividly seeing Black Plague for the first time and seeing this plastic tray and thinking, oh, is this where board games are going? Because that is really cool. Now,
yeah, I think a lot of us felt that way.
I didn't get to experience it until Massive Darkness 2. And experiencing it is really interesting because, like I said, very modular, but it starts out, you're putting your character card here, maybe a couple basic pieces of equipment, but the way Massive Darkness plays anyway, you're getting so much stuff throughout the game that it's constantly changing. You're constantly putting in new weapons, new armor, all the loot that you're getting, which makes this version of this, as far as the other Zombicide games and whatnot, my favorite. Because in Zombicide, you don't get as much of that experience.
I mean, you do get a lot of stuff in Zombicide, but the thing for me, at least, and it's hard, if you've not been gaming, I know we got a lot of new gamers in the past 5 years. If you weren't gaming back then, Zombicide was just a sheet of paper with a little clip that you had the slide that would fall off and it would get ragged, and those things did not work. So giving us this tray, and it's different. The Zombicide tray looks different, but having that to lay your guys in, and the peg and the places to put everything, like, it sounds crazy now because we've seen production blow up in games, but that was cool. Like, I was just like, you get a whole stack of these player boards, you're like, oh, this is
very
awesome.
Cool. It's also very inviting when you put this sort of component down in front of players who maybe aren't hardcore board gamers as well.
And we just don't forget where we came from. That's all.
Yeah, and we're not even touching on sort of the mini games that are involved in that game.
Yeah.
But, and this is a segue if you couldn't tell, mini games are what this one is all about. That's Lost Ruins of Arnak. Now, if you've only just played the original Lost Ruins of Arnak, you might be thinking of this board. It's fine. This is not the board.
It's serviceable board.
This is not the board we're talking about. This board was in the original game, and every player's board looked just like this, except the tents were a different color. Mm-hmm. This is not the one we're talking about. We're talking about these. In the expansions over time, they introduced variable players, and when we say variable players, we mean it. Each of these player characters has a minigame. These are two from the most recent expansion.
Yeah, the wheel that spins. I love
this. And
as
you can
wheel.
tell, like, that one has this whole wheel spinning mechanism. This one has these two holes here. Like, all the characters, I can't remember how many, are there 6 others?
There's at least 6.
At least,
I think probably more now that we've had this new expansion.
Yeah, there's a lot of different characters that all have their own different little mini game to play that really took this game, which I already liked quite a bit, to a whole new level. And I haven't even played nearly all the characters.
Well, and this is another great example of a game where you learn the rules for Lost Ruins of Arnak, and then they lay these player boards out, and you get to look at them, and you're like, this is, it's like changes everything. Like, These aren't just little, like, slightly different powers. They have different mechanics. They have different cards in their deck. They have different spots on their player boards to put things that other, like, it's wild how different these are, and I think it really serves the game.
Yeah, it really does. It made a game that wasn't really about player boards definitely a game about player boards.
All right, so we're moving into our top 5.
We are.
And this one, I think, is one of the best examples of a way that the player board and the gameplay kind of work together. This is La Granja, and I think that we said that right this time.
I want to say La Granja. If you disagree, let us know in the comments below.
But this one, like, the game is all about multi-use cards, and the way that they designed this player board to accommodate all of the different uses of cards is actually kind of genius.
Yeah, and this one, just so you know, this one is from the Deluxe Super Turbo Edition of the game. But even the original version of the game had these cutouts here. They didn't have the dual layers, so things slid underneath them well.
Oh, but it's so nice to have that dual layer.
I tricked mine out with little pads to help that happen. But all these spaces, when you look at this player board and you're using your cards in this game, you can use them on the top, have a completely different function. On this side, completely different functions. And on the bottom, another completely different function. Multi-use cards is one of my favorite mechanics. I think it's a lot of people's one of their favorite mechanics. And this player board just sort of emphasizes, like, oh yeah, here are all the places and ways you can play those cards. So when you're looking at your cards, you can actually see those sections and go, oh, okay, I get it. Not to mention, there's also just a lot going on this player board, and it is a reminder of all the different free actions that you can take. And this game it has so many free actions. I always say this, it's part of the brilliance of the game, but it also is part of the reason that the game can take maybe 4 hours to play.
It's true, it can. All right, let's talk about the next one. And this one is, the reason this one made the list,
because I love
one
it.
of your top games, but also, just look, this is one of the most fun boards just to even look at.
Yeah.
Like, take one glance at this, and you can already see the way that they've color-coded this board to all these different sections that draw your eye. And really, the game does play like these are kind of separate little things that you're doing in the game. Another aspect of brilliant design, but also just something that you immediately want to start messing with.
Oh yeah, this is dual layer. And this, it should be said, this is from Marrakesh, and it is from the sort of nicer version of the game. There is an Essentials edition, which doesn't have all of the bells and whistles.
Still great. We actually did a video on that player board, and it still is very functional and very cool.
Oh, incredibly functional.
But this is just gorgeous.
This is gorgeous. It's gigantic. Now that is going to be kind of a dual-edged sword here, because I like it because when you look at the table presence, you're like, whoa. But also, you have to have a table for 4 people to play this game. It's a lot of space. You could literally serve someone lunch on the back of this thing. But the reason I like this the most is whenever I teach this game, and I've taught it a lot, this player board serves as my guide to go through all of the important things that you have to teach. Because the mechanisms for how you play the game, what you do and the structure of a round, not terribly difficult. But all of the different things you can do are on this board in all these sections. So as I'm teaching it, I'm just like, I start in one corner and go, okay, that's how this section works. And then I go through the whole thing. Now, that is a lot of things to describe and explain, but it's such a great guide because I can go, okay, oh yeah, I didn't talk about the river yet. The river does this. This is how it works when you do the river. And as you're talking about each of those sections, it's kind of the same in terms of how you're interacting with it. You're adding a keshi to it or doing something else, activating the section. So you just have to talk about those 2 things with each section, and that's really all you need to know to play. Now, I don't want to make it sound like a simple game. It is not a simple game.
And it's a long game, but it's another example of one that as you play it over time, especially if you have the deluxe edition, just ends up looking gorgeous. You've got all these keshi everywhere. You've got all these gates in these places, and the actual wooden gates are depending on which version you have.
Also, this isn't even the full player board. There's a little board that goes across the top here that has even more going on. A place up here where you're effective, I think, just storing your resources. But over here, there's this little track that you use to unlock
It's a giant player board.
And that's not a module either. That is like just part of the game. They just didn't have that. It's so big that you couldn't put it together.
Well, this next one comes in a couple parts as well. And this is one of my
I'm gonna let you
favorite
talk
games.
about this
So I'm
one.
very excited to talk about this. And this is Nucleum. Now, the reason this player board made the list is for a bunch of different reasons. For one, it does kind of have that Terra Mystica-y style of remove a building, put the building out, you'll get some kind of bonus, which was probably more closely based on brass, which did something similar, but I like this one so much better. For one, the player board looks so cool, and the way everything kind of ties in together and all the graphic design on this is really good, and it's very easy to understand your income, and it has a place for everything. It has a place for your contracts to go on the side. All your action tiles slide into the top of this board really in a really satisfying way to measure these tracks, and it really makes a kind of more heavier game easier to understand because of the way they presented all this information. But the really cool thing about this player board is actually the machine that sits off to the side, the experiment that has its own board with all of these different experiment tiles that as you unlock things, as you carry out specific actions, you get to kind of activate these abilities in different order, and they're incredibly variable, and they give you one-time powers or in-game scoring or instant effects. Like, they're really, really cool. And just seeing it all kind of spread out together, I think it's a very intriguing looking player board.
I would say, I was teasing Ryan about this earlier, because this one and the next one, they appear to me as though you typed into AI, create an image of a very heavy board game player board. Because when this has everything going on, it's a glorious thing to behold if you're a board gamer. You look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, what is all that game doing? And it's just the player board. The other thing I want to point out about this one, graphic design is what really comes into play. I think on all of these to some degree, but as we enter these last three, I think graphic design makes a big difference. And I don't know if it's the same illustrator artist that did this, but this one also gives me, like, even just the choice of the numbers and the colors, it reminds me very much of Great Western Trail.
Yeah.
Like, it's got some similar things. And Great Western Trail, tip of the hat, honorable mention
We
on
talked
this
about
list.
that one.
I think Great Western Trail is another player board that, while at first was kind of like everyone wished it was dual layered, now it is.
Now it is.
And it's a much nicer player board as well. But it looks like this to me.
And the last thing too, I was talking about the graphic design. What I love about this is that a lot of the actions in the game that refer back to your player board, they actually show you the icon. So you know, like, okay, if I'm taking this action, it refers to this purple section. This action refers to this. It just makes the game a lot easier to parse. And I think that's something that carries through to our next board as well.
Yeah, this next one, we had to have a player board from this designer's games.
Yes, and to be fair, we picked this one, but in reality, the whole top 5 could have all been his games because he always has great player boards, and that is Vital Lacerda, and we chose Weather Machine for this one. Now, one of the reasons, first of all, this is a kind of player board that when I see this, I'm like, oh, look at look at everything that's happening here.
Maybe even more than Nucleum, it gives off that vibe when you look at this thing.
But again, this is a fantastic example of a player aid done well that takes a very complicated game and breaks it down because it literally doesn't just show you your turn order. It tells you step 1 only is this side of the board. Step 2, we come over here and do this. Step 3, you adjust your action. Step 4, you put your like it literally tells you which part of the player board you need to be focusing on for that individual action. And I think that is incredibly smart. And it literally has icons breaking down what you can do for each one of those parts of your player board, which is fantastic. And of course, you're gonna have stuff all over this board. You're gonna have the books that cover it. You're gonna have all these gears that come off that make up your machine. Like, this thing is massive, and it looks massive when it's done. But I think that Weather Machine and any Lacerda game is complex. And this is maybe more on Ian O'Toole, who did the design. No offense to Lacerda, he's great, but
well, I'm sure they work hand in hand.
I'm sure they do, but
the degree
his
to
graphic
which
design.
Yeah, the degree to which it services, like you said, the flow of the game. And we don't mean to suggest that it makes the game easy. It makes a very complicated and challenging game a little easier to digest.
It gives it a flow. You can understand, like, okay, what do I do at the start of, like, don't forget, this is the very first thing you do is you can flip this. Like, it makes it very easy to take stuff that you might forget, the little, like, bits and pieces that you have to do for each step, and really breaks it down for you. I really, really like that. Plus, I just think it's a cool looking player board.
Yeah, it is really cool. In fact, one more honorable mention before we get to our number 1, and that reminds me of it. There's a new game, it's not even out yet, A Place for All My Books.
Oh, yeah.
It does a thing that all player boards should try to do if they can, and that is, it has the step-by-step of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
I love you were saying. You don't, it's effectively the player aid and the player board, and those sorts of touches on games, especially if it's a game that you want to get in front of a lot of people or mass audiences, that just makes it so much easier to play. You have people can like look at their player board before they go, how do I do, or what's this, and what's the next thing I do again? They can just look at it right there, and there's like the numbered steps on it.
You know, Tool is great what they did for Unconscious Minds. Like, I just love when a game does that, when it really breaks down what you can do on your turn.
All right, it is time for our number 1 player board of all time. And I will tell you, this player board is the reason I went to Ryan and I said, Ryan, we should do a top 10 player boards. This literally is the player board because when I open this thing and I see this player board, it just makes me want to play Revive. Now, Revive was a game, my first time playing, I wasn't so hot on it. I wasn't getting it. It was late at night. I'm not going to blame the
first
peach.
problem.
It was late at night. I was tired. But the second time I played it, I absolutely fell in love. But both times, I was so fascinated with everything that was going on this player board. And I think we've talked about it a little bit. One of the reasons here, and probably more so than any of the other examples that we've shown today, it's highly thematic looking. Now, with that said, the theme of Revive is kind of an out there sort of theme, but this represents like this machine that you have in front of you. There's literally dials and buttons and switches. Not only that, there's a little token here that serves as a switch too. So as you're interacting with this thing, it really gets those, pun intended, gears turning because you really feel like you're building a machine and all these things are happening and you're building that sort of in-game engine of giving you all these different powers on these tracks. It too has a place to play your cards when you're playing them. They're not exactly multi-use in the same way that La Granja is, or La Granja. But there's a top and a bottom of the card, so if you play it here, you're going to do the top. You play it down here. There's little spaces on the board so that when you do play your cards, you can actually enhance that space so that it does even more when you're playing.
Yeah.
It is an amazing game, and we haven't even gotten to this part.
Yeah, and this is another, okay, we're going to talk about this again too. First of all, look at how cool it is that it just kind of slots in.
Yeah.
But this is another game that you learn how the player board works, and then you get your choice of all of these different player powers, which a lot of these will then kind of refer back to your player board in interesting ways and give you a ton of new powers. And I want to say, like, these powers, the board, everything that it kind of fits together, and it becomes incredibly tactile, not just because you're just adding things to the map. You're constantly interacting with these boards. You're taking tokens off of this. You're taking meeples off of this. You're taking little discs off this and putting them on the side, and you're adding those modules, and you're adding the machine parts, and you're moving your resources, and you're tucking your cards, and you're like, everything you're doing in the game, you're always interacting with your player board in some fashion, in a really satisfying fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd mentioned graphic design a little earlier. This, for me, you know, and some people, you know, graphic design and illustrations are divisive. You know, a lot of people like some things the way they look, some people don't. This one, to me, for me personally, this is what I want games to look like. The way this is drawn, the way this is illustrated, the iconography that they used, everything about this game, the color choice, the palette that they used here is so appealing to me. And it spreads through across all of the components.
Yeah,
and then
the board and everything.
It is one of the more colorful, rich-looking Euros that we've had in quite some time. And one of, probably a reason why it's one of our favorites.
And I will always love, and this is kind of summing up all of these because there are so many that we could choose from. But I always love when you're sitting down at something and it feels like it's an in-world component. Like, we've seen racing games that look like steering wheels and stuff. You know, it's just a cool way to present your player board.
Yeah, for sure, and it's done well, right? Because a lot of times when people attempt that and they miss the mark on the illustration or the style, it doesn't necessarily work. But here, it's just a thing of beauty, and it's really married so well with the mechanisms in the game and moving these things around the track and how that is integrated so importantly with everything you're doing in the game on the main board. It's why it's our number 1 player board of all time.
And I will say, I love this game. I played a ton on BGA, but normally I prefer that, not for this, because I miss that feeling of getting to actually interact with my board. Like, this just makes me want to right now just start playing it. And
I'm not just saying this, it does literally make me want to play it. When the player board, when you look at it and you're like, oh, let's play that again. Like, let's get that out and put it together. And that is why Revive is our number one. Now, like I said, this is a top 10 list. It's subjective. Will it change tomorrow? Maybe. You know, there's new player boards, there's new games every day. We've seen some that you might go, oh, what about this? What about, like, I was looking at the Planta Nubo board. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I've not played Planta Nubo.
Right.
So I don't have the experience to say, okay, that's why it's going to be on my list. Because if the game wasn't good for me, it's probably going to, as crazy as it sounds, probably not going to make this sort of list.
Sure.
Like, I've got to like the games too, right?
Sure, of course.
some degree.
I mean, all of these games, not that this is top 10 games, but yeah, I mean, if a game is just, you know what, last thing I'll say about this, sometimes a game is terrible when what's happening on the game and what's happening on your player board don't jive or it's confusing. Like, games can live or die based on how well their player boards are designed.
For sure. And a lot of these games, I think every one of these games works really well in its own right, but also do, for us at least, in large part to the player board. So let us know in the comments below what you think. Are there some player boards that we missed? Are you like, how could you even possibly do a list without including game X? Well, you can.
Tell you, they're on our short. Maracaibo is going to be one because that was so close.
Ryan just wants to use this as a platform to share all the rest of them.
Trail we mentioned. Well, I couldn't share all of them. I mean, there are some.
There's
really
a bunch
great...
of Suhi games too.
I know,
like Messina.
I know they're.
Woodcraft, all of these. Anyway, let us know in the comments below if there's a player board you think we missed, what your top 10 player boards are, whether you think this is a good idea. I actually like this idea. I think this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but man, oh man, it is a big thing and a big variable for us when we look at a game. So let us know in the comments below. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.